Hi, this is Pete with Let's Play Salesforce, and today we're doing something a little bit different. I'm recording now from the Atlanta airport, and I have the legendary Carl Brundage with me today, possibly one of the best Wave developers in the world, and we're going to do a little interview. So, Carl, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thanks, Pete. It's my pleasure. Hi, everyone. My name is Carl Brundage. I'm an architect that works inside of the Salesforce ecosystem. By day, I build a lot of dashboards inside of analytics, both for customers and also as an app that's targeted towards real estate. It helps asset managers really identify how their business is performing. By night, I lead the Lehigh Valley Salesforce Developers User Group with a couple of great MVPs, Jesse Altman and Peter Knoll, here in Eastern Pennsylvania.
Awesome. So how long have you been a part of that user group?
So I think I started out as a member of the user group, and then about a year and a half ago, I actually started being one of the co-founders. So the three of us shared roles in really bringing great content to the people in our area. And it's nice because we each have a different perspective. Jesse works for a partner in the ISV space, Financial Force, so he brings a lot of developing managed packages perspective. Peter works as an SI consultant, so he's going out and working with customers to implement, and then I have the analytics perspective. So we have a lot of members that will attend, and we'll focus on topics like what's new in an upcoming release, do Trailhead, we'll do things on analytics. We've had speakers that have given talks on different toolings that you can use inside of the Salesforce ecosystem, or even things outside of Salesforce, how you can bring Angular in, or continuous integration, continuous development. So I would encourage everybody to check out your local user group if you want to work inside of Salesforce as an admin or user, or the developer group if you're a developer. And even some of the larger areas, I know there's Pardot specific ones, Marketing Cloud. I think a few places may even have analytics, like in Chicago.
All right, make sure to check out their channel. There's a ton of great content. They do a lot of recordings, and there'll be a link to that in the description below. So our next question, what was Wave like when you first started using it?
So if I go back a few years, I started using Wave right after it was announced at Dreamforce. And I'll say it, if you think now, you end up going into code and JSON and SQL a lot to get things done. When it first came out, you did that even more. There's been a lot of improvements in bringing functionality into the user interface so that people can actually use clicks instead of code to change things like colors and bindings and how your dashboards display. In those early days, a lot of that was done entirely through code. And because the ecosystem around who's using analytics has grown so much, in the early days, there wasn't a lot of us around. So it was kind of tough to figure out where you could get help. Now with the community out there, I think thousands and thousands of people inside of the one group on the success community, there's a lot more collaboration. It's a lot easier to find answers to questions that you're coming with. There's less trial and error. If you run into something, you can post a question, and someone from the community usually has seen it before, and they're more than happy to jump in and share their insights with you.
So next question, what are your top 3 picks for the most impactful either winter 18 or summer 17 enhancements?
Sure. So I'll take a look at some of the things that are coming in winter 18. And, you know, I know there's some big bang features that are coming, but there's some smaller ones that I think are really impactful from a usability perspective. And there's things that I've run into myself that I wish there was a way to do. Probably the first one, it might be one of your favorites too, is some of the new SQL functionality, the ability to convert a number to a string, or a string to a number, or a date to a string. So I know that's a place sometimes people get tripped up. Hey, I have this stored as a number, but I want to see it as a grouping. How do I do that? And you know, in the past, yes, you had some functionality like dim to measure, where you could change a dimension to a measure, but you didn't have the reverse. So I think that type of functionality is going to give people a lot more freedom in what they're doing. And along the same lines, there's also the conversions that will take a date epic and turn it into a date, and the ability to do min and max by dates as well too. So before you could only do min or max by measures, now you can say, hey, give me the min date, the max date. So I put those SQL things as number one. The second thing that I would look at, I've heard this quite a few times from people in the community, is, hey, I created these 24 recipes in my sandbox. How do I get them into production? And it's kind of like, well, right now you need to recreate them. With Winter 18, now you can package those recipes in your change sets, and have them move from one environment to another. So I think that's going to be a huge time saver and really see a larger adoption of recipes now that you can move them between environments. And then the last thing that I would put in there, it's really around some of the dashboard functionality where you can start editing steps now. I know there's a lot of times in the past where I've wanted to make a slight modification to a step, but I had to clone it and then remove it. Now you can edit it. And along those same lines, when you're in a dashboard, you can do some things where you'll get prompted to save when you refresh or close the browser window. I know that placement of Command E or Control E right between the W where you'll close your window or an R will refresh. It means I've lost a lot of work in the past. So now there's kind of a safeguard that will keep you from doing that. The other thing that's coming is the widget sizes when you first put things on the dashboard. They're actually going to be smaller. I know when I build a pretty complex layout or I have something done and I want to add one more chart, when you have that big widget size, it's always tough because you got to drop it on the bottom and then move it up. So that'll help. One of the things I've heard from my customers sometimes, when you have numbers that are shortened, you know that they've been rounded in the past, and you know when you had things like 1 million, you wouldn't always see the right number of precision. So it might just say 1 million. Well, now you're going to have that extra decimal in there so you can see things as 1.1 or 1.2 million. So that's going to be helpful as well, too. And then last but not least, the ability to sort those compare tables, or excuse me, compare or value tables when you're on a dashboard. That was something that was there in the past in classic dashboards. It's going to make its way back in. So I kind of gave a lot of features, but they're all over under that dashboard enhancement category. So those would be my top 3.
Yeah, I gotta agree with you 100% on the prompt to save. I've actually recommended to people to change their shortcuts in Chrome, learn to type in Dvorak, take a screwdriver and pop that E button right off the keyboard, because there could be a lot of heartbreak there if you reload or if you quit by mistake. So that's a really great feature. So next question would be, what do you think the most needed improvements are for end users?
When I look at the end user experience, one of the things that I've heard from my users a lot is when we embed the analytics tab inside of Salesforce, the differences in how that tab behaves versus when you're getting into analytics and whether you're running an app or you're editing an app, it's very difficult to grasp those nuances of, are you in a run mode? Are you in edit mode? Welcome to run mode. I can view this by a breadcrumb trail, but I can't save. It just creates a lot of confusion that without knowing the minutia, you can't understand why I can't do something here and why I can do it somewhere else. So I think further refinement of the running mode and the editing mode and really bringing those together so that you have a more seamless, more cohesive user experience will go a long ways in helping people adopt analytics and get the most out of it.
So then, same basic question, but for a different angle, what do you think the most needed improvements are for developers, partners, and ISVs?
Okay, so I'm going to break that into 2. If I think about the partners first, one of the great things that's out there is the ability to create analytics templates. And if you're familiar with the sales analytics app or the service analytics app, where you go through a series of questions and it automatically creates your data flow, your dashboards, install everything that you need to run, as a partner, you can do the exact same thing with your app. You can go through and ask a series of questions and walk customers through the answers and have something up and running very quickly. The technology behind it is a templating language that involves JSON, it involves some mustache for replacement, free marker syntax. So it's something, again, I feel like we're back to the early days of wave development where there wasn't a lot of people, things are very technical, and it can be a little bit cumbersome to try things out because you're on the cutting edge. So what I think needs to happen there is just some more real-world examples. As more partners start using it, there'll be more people that are familiar with it on the success communities, really generating that body of knowledge where people can help out with, well, yeah, if I want to do this particular case, here's what the syntax looks like, or here are the errors that I'm running into. Now, if I think about the developer side, developers, they do spend a decent amount of time jumping back and forth between the dashboard and the JSON or SACL, whether it be binding statements or writing SACL. Some of the things I'd like to see is some improved ability when you switch back and forth between a dashboard and JSON mode. So Command D, Control E is, it's great, it jumps you there. But wouldn't it be nice if you could do a split screen and you could look at a step on a dashboard and the JSON at the same time, or take from a step and jump right to that spot in the dashboard's JSON? So go right to the widget or to the step, so that you don't spend so much time hunting for what you're looking for. The other thing that's come up a lot of times, I know that if I'm putting a static step or another step somewhere in my dashboard, I don't always remember when I scroll to another point the exact syntax. So if I could look at both of those at the same time, I think those things would really help my development productivity.
So next question for you. Now in Winter 18, we're going to have a new step type called the Apex step. And I'm getting really excited about what kind of possible things we can do with that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the Apex step is really a continuation in what you've seen, where originally we just had the compact form, then we had SACL steps, now we had SOCL steps where we could pull things from Salesforce. It's a continuation of saying, well, not every piece of your data has to live inside of Wave or inside of analytics for you to analyze it. So the Apex step really opens up that possibility where you're wanting to go after a larger set of data. I know the example that's given in the release notes is pulling stock prices. There's no way that you're going to pull data for every stock price every minute of the day across the world and store it inside of analytics. So being able to look that up when you need to compare something makes a lot of sense. I see further applications maybe inside of the real estate world where we're looking at market data. So for example, you're deciding what you want to rent a property for. Well, what's the going rates in this particular MSA, metropolitan statistical area, for one-bedroom apartments? Places like that where we can augment this external data that is considered a market that we really don't want to put inside of analytics, but it's very useful when you need to look up particular pieces. So it's going to be something that's kind of cool to get our hands on and start looking at the different cases people come up with.
All right, so next question I got for you, it's a little bit more of a best practices question. Now, how do you decide, what are the factors involved in deciding whether you're going to use a compare table or a compute transformation in the data flow, be it either compute relative or compute expression, or when you actually decide that you have to do dashboard level SACL?
Sure. So I probably have a reputation as being someone that loves my compare tables, and that's definitely the case. The main reason for that is when I build something with a compare table, it remains fully explorable for my users. And what that means is when you're on a dashboard, you can take a particular visualization that's built off a compare table, click the drop-down arrow, say Explore, and then start changing things. So for example, if you're looking at something by region, well, once you explore, you could drill down to a sub-region, then you could drill down to an MSA, and then you could look at a particular account or property or whatever the thing that you're trying to analyze inside of that MSA. So that ability to do exploration really makes me stay in a compare table for a lot of the things that I'm trying to do. Even more so when I'm working in a compare table, that's where often then I will augment what I'm trying to do in the compare table with that particular piece of data from a compute expression or compute relative. So looking at something like a ratio, if I go to a real estate example, you have square footage on a property. And that may be in a shopping mall where each unit has different square footage. Well, if you're just bringing over a square footage metric, it's really hard for you to compute an occupancy. So an occupancy would be areas that have a tenant in it versus ones that are unoccupied, because you need occupied square footage and actual square footage. Well, guess what? That's where I can augment my compare table with a value from the data flow and say, well, if this unit's occupied, create a new metric that is occupied square footage. You have your overall square footage. We put those in your compare table as column A, column B, do a simple division, and then you have the answer. So my mindset has always been put it in a compare table first, then augment it with something inside the data flow. Only after that, if it's really transforming data, so you might need to flip rows or columns, that's where it makes sense for SACL. So in the work I've done, the only place that well, there's two places really. The only place where first I end up with a lot of SACL is the waterfall. So when I use a waterfall chart for most times, I'm making the data change on the fly. So I'm moving things from rows to columns to kind of get the different groupings that I want. And there really isn't a great way to do that with the data flow currently. So that's one place where I come in and end up using SACL. And the other is if I have a visualization that needs to change to different data sets. So in the same visualization, perhaps you have a selector, and if you pick the first selector, it shows data from data set A, the second selector, data set B. There isn't a way in compact form to swap out those data sets dynamically, but you can do it with a SACL statement. So you can have different sources for each of your SACL statements. As you pick selectors, you make those charts switch from one place to another. So those are the two places in the dashboards that I'm building where I generally end up doing SACL. Everything else becomes a compare table, either as the data itself or as a chart that you visualize what is in data.
All right, so I got one last question for you. What are some words of advice that you can give to people who are just getting started in this space?
I think the first word of advice is Trailhead. Trailhead is a great place to start. There's a lot of analytics content out there. There's trail mixes that I've built that covers the different pieces of analytics. You probably have gone on and created trail mixes as well too. So it's a good place to get that kind of fundamental background, the basics of, well, what am I trying to do? After that, I think the success community is a great resource for you to ask really those business-specific questions. So while Trailhead will handle a lot of the fundamentals of what you need to do in analytics, it doesn't necessarily address the, well, I'm looking to do a 3-month rolling average of what my sales were. How do I do that inside of analytics? And that's where people have been there. They've done those things before, and they're more than happy to share with you thoughts on using a windowing function in a compare table or a SACL statement in order to accommodate that need. So those are a couple of the resources that I would definitely say when you're getting started can help you with the learning curve with analytics.
All right, so that's all I've got for today. Everybody, thanks for watching. Carl, thanks for joining us and all your amazing participation on the community. If you guys ever have questions, just post them on the community. Carl watches it like a hawk. He's really helpful resource, really helps out the community a lot. Make sure to check out the Lehigh Valley Salesforce User Group's YouTube channel, and there'll be links to all the different things that we were talking about in the description. Carl, thanks again, and everyone, thanks for watching.
My pleasure. Have a great day.